What's going on, everyone? Stop here with my buddy Rad Chad. We just saw Captain America Civil War for the second time, and we are going to bring you a spoiler discussion on the movie.
Let's start off by talking about the fact that Civil War wasn't Civil War. It's a big thing for me. I mean, I love the Civil War storyline. I love the incorporation of all the different characters. So I think where we can start out is differences and similarities to Civil War and Civil Skirmish, we'll call it.
Okay.
I think one of the first things that we see is how the Sokovia Accords, or as we know it from the comics, the registration, the Superhuman Registration Act, it starts out with the explosion of nitro, taking out, what is it, like 600 people, like tons of people.
It's a school.
It's a school. Tons of people get killed in this incident. But instead of that, they take the combination of the Sokovia incident in Age of Ultron and combine it with the explosion that it gets caused when Crossbones tries to take out Cap Ann. So it's hard to understand exactly where they were going to take it from the beginning. They wanted it to stay similar, but obviously with a limited ability for the characters, they they can't afford more characters.
I mean, I'll start off by saying this. I wish they would have been more risky with this movie. That is probably my biggest problem with it, is that I feel like if they would have just done like they did in the books, have it be a school, like, I don't know if that would affect whether or not it'd be PG-13 to rated R, if we're blowing up a school and kids here. But
it's the little tweaks.
Yeah.
It's the little tweaks that take it further and further and further away from the storyline as it goes. It's about the little things. The fact that you can't even call Miriam Sharp. Sharp. Why? Your son died in an incident. We said it was Sokovia instead of the blast from the superhero TV team, whatever you want to call them. But you take a name away. You call him, the last name Spencer. It doesn't make any sense. And why waste an opportunity to link the stories together?
Yeah. I don't know. I felt like that moment was more effective in the book than in the movie, because in the movie it was like, oh, this random office building. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, some people died, but that's not like the biggest catastrophe that we've had. Like, I know they were like, yeah, the events in Age of Ultron happen where we can tie that in with it as well, but in the book, when it's like, you took out a school, like, that makes more sense to me why, like, the government would be like, yo, that's not cool. You took out, like, little kids, and that makes...
The multi-millionaire, the billionaire, whatever he is, Tony Stark shows up to this funeral for this family. Like, a lot of people, oh, is it a show? Is it a ploy for, oh, let's give him, more credibility. Let's give him a higher rep. Other superheroes show up too, and that's when Miriam Stark spits in Tony Stark's face and says, you murdered my son. You are the one who did this. It's your kind that are destroying this planet. Where in the movie you have...
And her son was like, what, 6, 7 years old?
Yeah,
like, that
kid.
Totally makes sense.
Right. And then you have, now this son is grown, he's an MIT student, and he goes to Sokovia to further his expedition of life finding, or whatever you want to call it. But she is calm the whole time and just controlled about the whole situation. Doesn't have nearly the effect. I could read it out of a book and have more passion out of it than I got out of the movie.
Yeah. I don't know, or just something, other than just like a little building. Like, if it would have been like, oh, hey, the virus got out and affected like all the people in that area. Like, one building to start the events to like a Superhuman Registration Act, like, that's the breaking point.
Not even a building, 2 floors.
Yeah.
They took out 2 floors. The building didn't come down. Like, we had 2 floors that took, how many lives are there? Granted, we can't measure the worth of any one human life, but still, like you're saying, it's a school filled with children, like hundreds of people, children, versus an office building in Nigeria.
I mean, and I've been saying for the longest time too, and this is definitely something that could fill an entire other video, but just, they would have just waited a little bit longer, like done Civil War, not in a Captain America movie, in like Phase 4, when we have more characters, bring in like the Netflix characters, bring in like ABC's like Secret Warriors from like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. you get more of those people in, and yeah, it can be more convoluted, but at the same time,
you don't have to have these huge scenes for them. You don't need to have backstories. You don't need to have things piled on and piled on. People know who these characters are. They go see these movies. They know who the characters are, so you don't need backstories. You can drop these people in, but like you said, it's a phase 4, not a phase, beginning of phase 3, end of phase 2. That's not where this movie should have belonged. And like you said, it should have been more along the lines of Avengers, like 3, not Captain America 3.
And if you waited and you have all these other people in there, the book does a really great job of showing this, that you can have all like this huge cast and still like give the focus to your key characters to move the story along. That big cast is just there mostly for like the fight scenes to make that feel a bit more grand scale. Because this one, it's a fun scene. It's a really fun scene. It's one of the best scenes in the movie, but you can feel that they're holding back because they don't want to fight each other. And it's just like a couple of them. Like we've been saying since the beginning of this video, a civil skirmish. It's not a war. It's just like 5 people on one side, 5 people on the other. The book, it was like 50 to like 100 people on each side, and it felt like a war then.
Right, and not only the war, but in making the comparison, so what was it? The straw that broke the camel's back in the movie was Bucky killing someone that wasn't even a main storyline character. Yeah, T'Chaka is important. It's what brings us to T'Challa in the movie. But that's what the straw that broke the camel's back. That's what brought on the war. Like you said, I mean, you're pulling punches. Hawkeye and Black Widow, they're pulling punches. They're not trying to hurt each other. And when you look through the entire fight scene, even comparing it to the comics, they're going at it. They're throwing hands and people are getting hurt. But the big drop in the movie versus the comic book, it never happened. There was no big drop. Yeah, Rhodes falls out of the sky. Iron Patriot, War Machine, whatever your preference is, falls from the sky, hits the ground, and he's injured. He's still alive.
Yeah.
We see Goliath go down from the Thor android, the Thor android that gets made up by is it Hank Pym and Reed Richards?
Yeah.
He dies. That's when everyone stops and everyone realizes, like, no one is supposed to die. This isn't what's supposed to happen. Why does it take some information about some facial recognition software and a guy who's dead in a bathtub to stop a fight?
Yeah.
Why is that what takes us to the end of a fight?
For those watching who haven't read the book, Goliath is kind of like Giant Man was in the movie. He's a guy that can get really big, grow really big. And Thor, in the books at this point, was dead. And so when he shows up on the scene, everybody's like, oh shit, like Thor's here. We thought you were dead. Turns out it's not the real Thor. It's this clone android that...
all the powers.
Yeah.
He has the powers, the lightning, the strength, the hammer, but doesn't have his moral alignment. He is an android. It's not your vision, like he understands the human life and versus an android and things like that. He's just an android.
Created by Tony Stark and Hank Pym and Reed Richards.
To get the upper hand in the fight.
And that's another reason why I think this movie could have been a bit more risky, is that all the interviews leading up to this movie, Robert Downey Jr. is like, oh, I don't know if the general public's gonna like me, they're gonna view me as like the bad guy, and like, that got me excited because in the book, yeah, he pretty much is like the bad guy. He makes a lot of decisions that morally you're like, wait a minute. And I just wish that they would have brought that into the movie a little bit more. Like, yeah, you don't need to make like this android. I mean, he could have brought back Quicksilver that way. And that could have really affected Scarlet Witch
could have
too.
Been a huge wrench just thrown in the entire situation.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin. So, I hope you all have been enjoying this spoiler discussion on Captain America Civil War. What happened was, during the filming, somewhere in that conversation, which is pretty much where I cut this video off, the camera turned off. And so a chunk of our discussion was just completely cut off. And so let me just kind of summarize what was talked about in that little portion of the video. So I was talking about how I wanted the movie to be just a little bit more risky, and I was talking about Tony Stark's portrayal in the movie and how I wish it would have been just
a little bit closer to the book. Because going into this movie, Robert Downey Jr. himself had hyped up his character to be more or less of a villain. Kind of similar to how he is in the Civil War book itself. Now, he's not really a villain, but he's just making very risky decisions, very non-good guy decisions. But he's making them with the best intentions, with what he feels like is the right moves. Now, in the movie, we get the raft prison where the majority of Cap's team is eventually locked up. That, in the book, is Tony Stark's idea. Him and Reed Richards and Hank Pym, they build this prison in the negative zone, which is owned by Fox. If you've seen Fantastic, you will know what I'm talking about, because that's the dimension that they travel to. And so that was his idea. Like I was talking about when the video cut out, Tony Stark, Hank Pym, and Reed Richards make a cloned android of Thor, who is currently dead in the books at the time. And I thought it would have been cool to just see them bring Quicksilver back in that way. It would have played a big role with Scarlet Witch, but just more decisions like that. Throughout that book, Tony Stark is making these decisions because he feels like it is the right thing to do. Similar to how the movie is, but in the movie, like halfway through, he starts to regret some of those decisions that he's more or less backing, and he more or less sides with Cap towards the end until that pivotal third act of the movie. But I just wish it would have followed a little bit closer to the books in that aspect, where it was Tony Stark's ideas to bring all this stuff together to support the Sokovia Accords, or as it's referred to in the books, the Superhuman Registration Act. So that is part one of my spoiler discussions on Captain America Civil War with my good friend Chad Coffin, aka Rad Chad. If you liked this, please subscribe and stay tuned, because I will have two more parts coming up. One where we talk about wasted opportunities in Captain America Civil War, and then to end it on a good note, we talk about the things that we really liked about the movie, the things that worked, because at the end of the day, this was a really good movie, and we as comic book fans enjoyed it. But as comic book fans, there were some things that we didn't like, there were some things that we thought could have been better, and so that is the kind of content that I like to bring to this channel. Stuff that normal moviegoers wouldn't necessarily talk about in a YouTube channel. Something that us hardcore comic book fans who know the source material, love the source material, will talk about. So thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 of this spoiler discussion. And please check out my Road to Civil War series that I had for Captain America Civil War, as well as my spoiler-free video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all real soon.